As political tensions heighten around the world, the threat of war is becoming all the more likely, with the doomsday clock, which represents worldwide dangers, being recently turned closer to midnight. Improved technologies, along with increasingly conflicting interests, means that militaries around the world are now developing their own munitions. So that begs the question, what types of weapons would the West be subject to should war break out? It's time to batten down the hatches as we look at 10 of the most destructive super weapons being designed by America's enemies.
Amazing!
Number 10. Aviation Thermobaric Bomb of Increased Power. The affectionately titled MOAB, which stands for Mother of All Bombs, was dropped by U.S. forces on an ISIS stronghold in 2017. It is the largest non-nuclear weapon ever used in combat, and obliterated its target. Well, Russia has one that's more powerful, known as the Aviation Thermobaric Bomb of Increased Power. Working in a similar way to the American-designed weapon, this one is dropped from a bomber and glides down with a parachute. It detonates before hitting the ground by the ignition of a fuel-air mixture, and the force it produces is the equivalent to a small nuke. That's 4 times as powerful as the one that was dropped on an ISIS bunker. It works in 2 stages, with the initial blast releasing explosive materials in a cloud, which is then detonated. The pressure wave that this creates evaporates everything that lies in its path, and is followed by a vacuum effect that compounds the damage. This insane weapon has only ever been used once during a test in 2007, and the temperatures recorded were twice that of the MOAB. Enemies of Russia better watch out, because this really is the daddy. Number 9. Chinese Naval Fleet. The Chinese ship, the Liaoning, is a Soviet-built aircraft carrier that the Chinese bought in 2012. It went through an extensive refit before going into service, and was the first Chinese aircraft carrier to enter service. With over 2,000 personnel on board, and even its own TV channel, it's a sign of the country's ambitions, and only the beginning. However, the US shouldn't really be that worried. The US has 11 aircraft carriers, while this is China's only aircraft carrier, and far less advanced than those in service by the US Navy. For example, the Liaoning launches planes off a sky-jump-style deck because it lacks the catapults that US carriers have. Not only that, American-made aircraft carriers are 2 steps ahead, already developing electromagnetic aircraft launch systems, instead of steam-catapulted launch systems which take time to recover. But China also has a number of nuclear-powered submarines, with the most recent being the Type 94 class. There are currently thought to be 4 of them patrolling the waters, each of which are armed with 12 ballistic missiles with a range of 5,000 miles, which allows them to be in range of US territory while remaining in Chinese waters. While this may be worrying, their fleet is still less than 1/10 of the size of the US Navy submarine fleet, but the Chinese fleet is advancing. They also now operate drones, with the CH-5 variant having a range of up to 12,500 miles. They're equipped with smart bombs, missiles, and radar jammers. Previous models have already been used to eliminate ISIS and Boko Haram threats. They're fairly similar to America's Global Hawk drones, but are not yet anywhere near as effective. Number 8. Russian defenses. As well as offensive weaponry, Russia is significantly expanding its defensive capabilities. The naval proton gun, for example, is a shore-based protection outpost that's designed to prevent craft of any size from landing. It's a souped-up version of the Russian AK-130 cannon, which is mounted on ships and is able to fire up to 40 rounds a minute to a distance of 15 miles. With a laser designator and liquid-cooled barrels, it can track even the smallest of vessels by their motion in the water. The shells cannot be shot down by vessel defense systems, however. Railguns on the upcoming US Naxi-Zumwalt-class destroyers could take these weapons out due to their high speed of Mach 5 to 6. Then in 2017, the Almaz Ante defense contractor completed trials of a new high-altitude missile defense system called the S-500, which is due to enter service by 2020. The missiles have homing heads, so can be launched as soon as a threat is detected, follow, and ultimately neutralize any incoming missile attack. The deployment of these, along with smaller versions for use on the battlefield, will protect them from all but the most advanced threats. Number 7. North Korean EMP. North Korea is somewhat of an unknown when it comes to weapons development. The reclusive country has long been associated with nuclear research, and in the past couple of years, it launched a number of missile tests and conducted underground detonations. They're also thought to be heavily involved in chemical weapons research, but despite all of these threats, the most damage they could cause would be through the use of a nuclear weapon, not because of its direct impact, but the electromagnetic pulse that it would generate. If they do manage to develop a missile capable of delivering a nuclear payload to the continental United States, it's more likely that they will detonate it at high altitude. The resulting blast would rain contaminated material down to the ground. But the resulting EMP would have the potential to knock out large parts of the energy grid. This in itself would have a far more destructive damage to the country's economy than if they directly targeted a city. Number 6. U-74 Hypersonic Missile. NATO provides a wall of defense for the countries that are signed up to it, but future technologies mean that the traditional defense techniques may not be enough. In 2016, reports surfaced of the Russian-built U-71 hypersonic missile, essentially a nuclear glider that could fly, without detection, to virtually anywhere in the world before delivering its payload. Once launched, it enters a low orbit around the Earth and can reach up to 7,680 miles per hour. This would allow it to reach London in only 13 minutes and the eastern coast of the US in little more than an hour. What's more, the missile will be able to hold 24 separate warheads, each of which can be precisely targeted. Another powerful missile is the BrahMos missile, which has been a collaborative effort between the Russians and the Indian Defense Research and Development Organization. The first successful test fire of this new design was conducted in 2013, and is currently the fastest cruise missile in use. It's able to be fired from a submarine, ship, or from land, and to make it even more effective, they are currently working on making a version that's supersonic. While there are rumors that NATO missile defense systems won't be able to shoot these Mach 2 to 3 missiles down, it is thought that SM-6 long-range naval missiles should do the trick. Number 5. Russian submarines. As much as the race for dominance above the waves has led to the construction of massive warships, it's possible that the vessels that sail underwater provide the biggest threat. Russia has a large fleet of submarines, and in recent years, they've been more active than ever. For example, at the end of 2017, NATO released a report detailing a noticeable increase in Russian undersea activity in the Atlantic. Recent developments in the Russian Navy have seen them move towards quieter and more lethal designs. They now have 60 full-size subs to the 66 that the US operates. But one frightening innovation is the new drone sub. Completely unmanned, it can carry nuclear weapons to within range of anywhere on Earth, and are much smaller than the manned vessels. They also have a range of automated spy submarines that can remain undetected, or, if they wish, imitate any other class of sub. Their weapon systems are advancing too. Embarrassingly, Russia recently revealed secret plans for a long-range nuclear torpedo called Status 6, which appears on a Russian TV news network. Launched by a submarine, it would create wide areas of radioactive contamination. The document says, worse yet, Russian military experts note that a warhead of up to 100 megatons could produce a tsunami up to 500 meters or 1,650 feet high, wiping out all living things 1,500 kilometers or 930 miles deep inside US territory. Now that's worrying. Even though it can't always be seen, the war for underwater superiority is only just getting started. Number 4. Strategic bombers. No arsenal would be complete without some serious air power, and recently, both Russia and China have revealed their new-look bombers. The Tupolev Pak-DA is the new Russian stealth bomber that in early 2018, the US Nuclear Posture Review mentioned as being something they should be prepared to come up against in the future. It's a very long-term project though, so isn't in operation yet, and that's a good thing. It's expected to be optimized as a strategic missile carrier with the ability to launch long-range cruise missiles, as well as dropping nuclear gravity bombs. Like its US counterpart, the B-52, it's designed to evade detection and be able to covertly fly into enemy territories. It's not expected to come into service until the 2030s though, so it's not something to worry about quite yet. China's new Xi'an H-20 bomber, on the other hand, is expected to be in service soon, and it's at the cutting edge of stealth technology. Little is known about this vehicle at the moment, but it's said to resemble the B-2 Spirit bomber that's used by the US Air Force, and will have a payload capacity of 45 tons. As well as being able to deliver traditional payloads, this bomber is also being designed to engage in electronic warfare with the ability to disable other aircraft mid-flight. But again, Western nations seem to have this covered, since the US alone has 21 operational B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. Number 3. Chinese missiles. With vast resources devoted to developing new technologies, China is fast becoming one of the world leaders in missile design. In 2014, they carried out a test of an intercontinental ballistic missile which had multiple warheads. The basis of the design came from plans that were illegally obtained from the US in the 1990s. And while it's not a new idea, it's the first time it's been applied to Chinese weaponry. Known as the DF-41 missile, each warhead is independently targetable once released, which means that it only takes one of these to get through defenses before they can cause serious damage. A test in 2007 showed evidence of another area in which Chinese missiles are developing, ones that can take out satellites. The SC-19 anti-satellite missile was the first successful test of this type of weapon since the US military did something similar in 1985. Launched as a multi-stage solid-fuel missile, it was able to track a weather satellite and destroy it by simply smashing into it. This is no easy thing to do because it requires precise tracking and guidance to accomplish. It means that now, if the Chinese are suspicious of any satellites, they have the capabilities to knock them out. Number 2. Russian supertank. Despite the fact that the Cold War ended more than 2 decades ago, Russia continues to be a powerful force on the world stage and still develops cutting-edge weaponry. You may have seen some images of their supposed new supertank circulating last year, which turned out to be no more than concept art created by a video game designer. But this doesn't mean the supertank is a myth. In 2016, British military intelligence issued a warning about a new design called the Armada tank. While its battleground abilities have yet to be seen, it's thought to be much lighter and faster than those owned by Western forces, and has a novel turret design that is more efficient at protecting crews under fire. Surrounded by newly designed composite armor, equipped with a cutting-edge radar system, and reportedly having a higher muzzle velocity gun and upgraded missile system, this tank will be well placed on the battlefields of the future, and one to be wary of. However, it will be difficult for this tank to outdo the performance of NATO tanks like the M1 Abrams, let alone outnumber them. NATO has around 4 times the amount of battle tanks as Russia at their disposal. Number 1. Cyber military espionage. So we've seen that militarily, the US and NATO has this whole conventional war thing figured out pretty well. That's why the biggest threat to the West isn't necessarily the physical weaponry they're up against. China's equivalent to the US Cyber Command is called the Strategic Support Force, or SSF. They're responsible for top-level decisions about cyber policy, and after years in development, are thought to have superior capabilities to the US in this regard. They conduct cyber espionage, directly hacking into the files of foreign governments to collect information, and propaganda campaigns which are less direct ways of achieving certain aims. Their skills in the cyber arena could spell danger for the West. Militaries are so reliant on technology that a skilled attack or computer virus penetrating US cybersecurity could disable the whole force. Of course, it's not just China that does this, they're just the world leaders. Russia also has an effective cyber division that is suspected of having influenced elections across the world in recent years, including those for the recent American and French president elections, as well as the Brexit vote. North Korea is also actively involved in this, as unlike traditional warfare, it can be conducted from virtually anywhere without needing visible military hardware. A number of recent breaches of nationally important systems in America, Europe, and Asia have been blamed on them, and they show no sign of holding back. So there they are, the weapons that will have a large role to play in the wars of the future. Which of these are you most concerned about, and are there any others you think that should have made the list?